Welcome to Industry Insiders, created and produced by the Center for Entertainment and Hospitality Management at California State University, Fullerton. During this series, we sit down with influential professionals in the entertainment and hospitality industries that are located across the world. Our goal is to learn about each professional's career and gain wisdom from their experience in the industry.
This week's guest is Tiffany Sant'Anselmo, aka DJ Ruby Blue, who is the Associate Director of A&R Operations at Epic Records. Tiffany has previously worked at Disney Music Publishing and Hollywood Records, and has a plethora of experience in the music business. Please join us as we welcome DJ Ruby Blue.
What's up, everyone? We have Tiffany with us. How are we doing today, Tiffany? We doing all right?
Good. I love that little video.
Yes, you like that video, right? That's
Very nice.
Good. So welcome. And,
I do.
And then
Thank you.
our co-host is Grizel, recently graduated, Grizel Vasquez. How are we doing, Grizel?
Ooh, doing great, thank you.
You like how that sounds, right? Recently graduated, right?
It has such a great ring to it, actually.
We love it. So Tiffany, why don't we start off? I want you to share with us how you came up with the name DJ Ruby Blue.
I knew of that name a long time ago. I worked at this one company, and my boss at the time was managing a band with that name. And they actually changed the name to something else, which I loved the name Ruby Blue. So I was kind of surprised that they changed it because I thought Ruby Blue was the better name. And then eventually they disbanded. And so, many, many years later, when I was DJing and I had to come up with a DJ name, I remembered that somehow. And because I still, am in touch with my old boss, I said, hey, do you have any objections if I use the name? He said, no, absolutely not. And I did some research and there wasn't any DJ Ruby Blues. And so here I am.
Here you are. So if during the interview you hear me call Tiffany Ruby Blue, that's why, because we're both
Yes.
DJs, and that's how we met through Scratch Academy. So that's my disclaimer right now.
And likewise, if I refer to Professor Roberts as Amro.
Yes. How about you share with us kind of what your role is currently with Epic Records, and then we'll kind of let that steer our conversation.
Okay. Right now, I am the associate director of A&R operations at Epic Records, which is under Sony Music. I kind of oversee the projects from the start of recording through delivery. So what that means is, we deal with, we work with A&R, we sort of come up with the plan, we, help work with the budgets, and then sort of oversee it as it goes through the recording process. And then when it, booking the studios and stuff like that, working with the producers, working with the artist managers. And then when, it sort of gets to the mix process, at that point, our role sort of really kicks in. We work with the mix engineers to, collect files. Once we get the ideally before the final mix, we will submit audio for clearance, for sample clearance, for side artist clearance, which are the features. We want to submit it for sample clearance before the final mix, because if there is a sample or an interpolation, a lot of times now there are sample packs and loops.
Right.
But if there's something in there that we're not able to clear the rights to, then it has to be removed. And so we try to catch that, before it's mixed and certainly before it's mastered, because you don't want to spend the money and then have to go back and remove it and replace it with something else and then pay to have it remixed and remastered again. So we, work with the clearances and then the mastering engineers to get the files. There's also something, with the file delivery process. So when it comes to the mixers, they need to, and the producers, but usually it goes through the mixers, where they have to deliver all the session files to the record label. So that includes the multis, the unmastered final mix, and all the mix passes. So you have the main, which is generally the explicit, a clean if there is one, a TV track, which is the performance track without the vocals, an instrumental, and an a cappella. And then they also have to deliver the stems. And so we take all of those files and collect them. We send them to a verification company, and they will go through and make sure that nothing is missing. Everything is there. Stems aren't missing. The cleans are actually clean, because sometimes words get missed. So they go through and sort of verify everything. And once we're able to sign off and say, okay, this delivery is complete, then they will archive it. So, and then at that point, the mix engineer can be paid. And then same with getting the masters. We need to get the main, the clean, all the mastered passes. And then I will deliver it to our production team, and they will ingest it. If there's physical product, which, sometimes we still do vinyl or CD, more vinyl. We get those masters, we deliver it to them, and then they will ingest it into our system and out to the DSPs, the digital service providers.
Okay. That's a lot of work there. A lot of work. Yeah. In the green room, you shared with me that now you're as busy as ever. What kind of is taking and keeping you busy right now?
Well, quarantine. So we're all working from home now. We've been working from home for just over 2 months now. And, there's a lot of content that we're putting out, just for, in my case, on the release side. But then we have, our marketing teams and our product managers who are pushing out all this online content and, coming up with, like online concerts and, snippets of performances and things like that. So, everybody's sort of had to shift. But I think in terms of just the regular recording and releasing, we had a lot of content in the pipeline already. So, we're still working on that, but we also had to sort of think ahead of, even 2 months, especially 2 months ago, we didn't know how long this was going to last and how this was going to play out. So all the recording studios are closed. So we needed to think of, what happens once, we can't run out of content. So how are we going to keep the artists recording when there aren't studios? Some artists have their own home studios available, but for the ones that didn't, we had to make arrangements with certain vendors to order equipment for home studios. So we got a lot of artists set up with laptops and home studios, so they can they can just kind of keep going. And they're still working with their producers, and we've got them professional high-end equipment, so they can put out quality recordings. So that's sort of how we're doing it.
Interesting. So what I'm going to do is, you gave us a lot to digest there. I'm going to bring and let Griselle introduce yourself. First of all, Griselle, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then you have one question, and then Griselle will go back and forth between her and I with questions. So go ahead, Griselle.
Oh, so my name is Griselle Vasquez. Like he just mentioned, I'm a recent graduate from Cal State Fullerton and EHM. I did want to ask, kind of along that same thread, from your position or your standpoint, moving forward after this pandemic, what do you think is going to change the most about the music industry, like from the learnings of this?
I think it's still kind of early to tell, because we don't know how it's going to pan out with concerts and touring in particular. I think there's going to be more people working from home, and possibly for a long time, because it's definitely working. I think we have a lot of releases coming out, so we've had to. I think people are actually working longer than, we're working more. Like, I don't have a commute now, so I start kind of when I wake up and I make some coffee, and we have our office in New York, so they're already 3 hours ahead. So, I'm not commuting from the valley, so I might as well just start working.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not quite sure in terms of recorded music. I think, we're just gonna keep going. I think that's, I think streaming is up, and I mean, I know I'm not sure how that is in terms of radio, because people don't have their morning commutes where they're listening to the radio. So that may have changed, but as far as the recorded music side, I think it's stronger than ever.
So I'm going to continue off of what Grizel asked you in terms of creating content. Since you have to make it last for we don't know how long, what are some creative ways you've seen artists and your team create content that you wouldn't have expected before this happened?
There's definitely content about washing your hands.
Yes.
But I mean, they're doing like content in their own house, and just like doing covers and just kind of interesting things that just are in place of, like, normally they'd be getting ready to go out on tours right now. So I think they're coming up with just different ways. They're recording videos at home, that sort of thing.
Okay. We had a question from the audience. Has working from home during the current pandemic created a bigger demand for content? You kind of spoke about that, but anything else to add?
I think so, because we have to keep everyone's at home now, so we have to keep them entertained.
Yeah. What platforms have you seen emerge from the pandemic that maybe surprised you, or just in general, what platforms have kind of gotten even more popular?
I think just in general, Twitch. Well, TikTok for sure. I mean, TikTok was big already, and now it's just bigger.
You're right.
And then now you see Twitch. People are streaming on Instagram Live that people who weren't streaming before are streaming now. So I don't know if it's necessarily the platform. I just think there's a lot more people out there, engaging in it.
We talk about Twitch in class, as Grizel knows. We spend a whole, week and a half on Twitch. What about that platform do you like? Where do you kind of see it kind of fitting into the ecosystem with their artists?
You know what? That's not really my side at work. So I know that our artists stay engaged on all platforms. I mean, especially TikTok. As far as Twitch, I'm not as familiar with it. I'm more familiar with it in terms of, like, the DJ world.
Right.
And everybody's popping on that now.
Yes. And we're going to get to some DJ questions soon as well. I'm going to let Grizel ask her next question.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, normally, how do you tackle problem solving within your job? And, have any of those sets of skills kind of helped you out during the new work from home situation?
Problem solving is, like, I think the problem solving is just, you got to figure it out. And so I think and it's kind of a hard question to answer. I mean, a lot of, like, if I have something I need to figure out, a lot of times I will first reference back, because there are so many projects happening at the same time at quick turnarounds with some of these delivery deadlines. And so it's very easy for something to, fall through the cracks if you don't stay on top of it. So if there's an issue, I always sort of look, where did I last leave off with this, or, just to refresh my memory. So I'm always looking at, my notes. I take constant notes. Who said what and when? Always keep the date. And then I look back in my my sent email folder. What was the last, where did we leave off in this conversation, before I pick it back up again. And so it's always sort of like referencing where you're at with something, trying to, I delete nothing, which is sort of like a work philosophy. So I have constant, like, backup to reference. And so as far as, like, kind of getting all my thoughts in order and what is going to be the next step, a lot of it is just, you just got to figure it out. And if you don't know, ask, and like I always tell people at work, they're more than welcome to ask me questions if they're not sure how something's done or why, or, do I have any input on something? And then with working from home, because everything is basically through email and video conferences now, I don't think it's really changed that much more than the environment.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
the number of hours.
Yeah. Keep going, Grizel. Do you have something else to follow up, or?
Yeah, I had another question just more about, for instance, your position. So what really fulfills you with your current position right now at Epic, and kind of what are the moments that make you think like, oh, this is why I love to do what I do?
It's always comes down to the music. Like, there's so many reasons why I love music and the creative process and how it's recorded and how it's listened to and how people respond to that emotionally. And, then there's a whole music therapy side of music. I mean, it goes deep. And so I am always fascinated by music. And, and there's only 88 keys on a keyboard. And
Yes.
so, but yet there's so much you can do with it, and so the music, I am forever fascinated by music, and it always surprises me. And, you can have a song and then somebody covers the same song in a completely mind blowing way. And it's just, I'm always impressed by the music. And so that's why I stay in it, is just for the love of the music. And I'm fortunate in my position because, I'm sort of given the autonomy to, do my job and do what I need to do to get it done. And I have, a wonderful team that I work with. And, not just, my boss in operations, but also the A&R team and, everybody else in the various departments. So it's just a very nice place to work. Yeah.
Speaking of music, who are some of the musicians and artists you're kind of feeling right now?
Well, Future just dropped an album last week, so that's
Okay.
really big right now.
Yes, we heard.
Yeah, there's Future, there's Travis Scott.
Right.
We have Camila Cabello and Megan Trainor, and we've got a lot of artists that are new signings that are in development as well. So there's a lot. There's a lot on our roster.
How has DJing helped you succeed and excel in your current position?
I think DJing actually helped in getting the job, and that's just sort of kind of my impression, because it is, kind of Epic is predominantly a hip hop label. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to make sure that who they hired knew hip hop. And so because I was a DJ, I do.
Yes, you do.
plus I just enjoy listening to it. But, I think, and I think people just like the knowledge that DJs have. We're kind of like music connoisseurs. We have to know what's happening currently, and what people are listening to and what's on the radio and what people are responding to on the dance floor, and that back and forth interaction between the music and the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have to know that Lady Gaga just dropped a new song last night with Ariana Grande. Shout out to Joy for cluing us on that. So we have to know all these things. What you talked about how you interviewed and you kind of got the job at Epic. How did that happen? How did they find you? And what was the interview process like? The reason I ask is that many of our students currently and graduates are in the middle of interviewing or going to be interviewing soon. Kind of walk us through your process and how it worked out for you.
Well, I had been, you and I have actually talked about this before. I had been looking online. And, I had a great job previously, and, but I was looking to sort of, grow. And so I had been looking online pretty much every day, every morning. And the website that I think is very good is entertainmentcareers.net. So that's a very good one. You know, and a lot of times if I see a job posted there, I'll also check directly on the company's website as well. So I always check both. I'd check Universal, and I would check, you know, Sony Music, and I would check, you know, what's happening over at Warner and you know, the different publishing companies. And, you know, so besides going directly to the company's website, usually Entertainment Careers was very good. So I happened to catch it when I saw the job posted. And, you know, this business, you know, you hear it is all about relationships. It is all about relationships. It is who you know. And, you know, you, like you have control over your work ethic, but the rest is sort of timing and opportunity. And you kind of need somebody to open the door for you. Yeah. And so, you know, it just so happened that I had previously worked with some of the people who, you know, with my boss now, I had worked with her at like 2 jobs before, you know, and we had a good relationship. And so, you know, I reached out when I saw this, and, you know, that's how I was able to get the interview. Yeah. But really, any interview that I've had was through somebody that I knew.
Exactly. Relationships. How did you first get into the music industry? Dr. Kim, our co-director of the center and professor here, wants to know.
Well, I fell in love with a guitar player when I was 20. And so I started promoting the band, and, you know, because we dated for a number of years. And so I was always doing stuff for his band, and, you know, became friends with the other guys in the band. And we're all still friends today. And I was like, I thought I could do this as a job. So I changed my major in college. I graduated from Cal State Northridge over at CSUN. And they had a wonderful music industry program. And that also incorporated music performance, because they wanted you to know your product and know what it's like to be the musician and communicate with the musician. So we had to go through performance and theory and harmony and like the whole, you know, recording, and then the business side and music history and, you know, all of that. And so, so I loved it. And that's really where I developed my love for music and for the business. So that's how I got into it. And so when I graduated, I had my internship at Sony. This is actually my second time at Sony. Okay. So I had my internship at American Recordings. They were with Sony at the time. And then from there, I ended up in Sony's recording studio, you know, working. That was my first job in the music industry, was working in Sony's studio when they had one in Santa Monica.
Nice. What was your responsibilities?
I started out as an administrative assistant. So I was doing all the bookkeeping and handling finances, which I also highly recommend. Like if you handle money, it's a very good, I don't want to say job security, because there's really no such thing as job security, but if you know how to handle the books and handle finances, it's a good skill to have. Yeah. And then I ended up, you know, toward the end, I was managing it. And then from there, I went on to, you know, different jobs.
Okay. I never knew that guitar story. That's a good one, though. Thanks for sharing. We like that. All right. So we have some questions from the audience again. We have from Joey, who's also a recent graduate as well. Congrats, Joey. He says, hi, Tiffany. If you could be stuck in 1 year's music scene, which year would it be? And you're welcome for the shout out, Joey. So that's his question.
1 year's music scene?
Yes.
God, my head just exploded. I mean... 1 year? Okay. I can't answer that.
Give us your top 3. Give us your top 3 there.
right now, there's so much good electronic music. Like I was listening to Odessa this morning. Like there's so much good, you know, chill electronic music. But then there's like, you know, 90s hip hop, like the golden era of hip hop. That would be amazing. But then also, like I loved 90s alternative grunge, you know, like Smashing Pumpkins will forever have my heart, and Stone Temple Pilots, and you know what I mean? Like there's too many genres and so much good music to sort of narrow it down.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Okay, you gave us 3 though. That's good. You gave us 3. I'm gonna toss it back over to Griselle because I know she has another question for you.
Yeah, I wanted to know. So you mentioned within DJing and your current position too, the importance of staying relevant within whatever industry or whatever aspect you're interested in. Are there any podcasts, books, or even like social media feeds that you really use to stay in tune with what's going on?
The podcasts I listen to kind of are more, well, And the Writer is a great, great podcast about, especially if you're looking into, publishing or just to know who's writing what and, what's happening in the writing world. And the Writer is an excellent podcast. There's one that I like that's, and then there's also Rick Rubin's podcast. I think it's called Broken Record. Is a good one. There is Slate has one, Hit Parade. I'd have to look it up for you.
Yeah.
But Slate has a music one, and they kind of look at the music they look at why songs became number one historically, and they look at different decades and they look at different genres and how did that song do on the chart and why. And so to me, that's fascinating. And then there's another one, not necessarily, it's not about current music, but it's called, I think The Session by Christian Hand. And so they, on Mondays on KLOS, they'll take about 20 minutes and they'll do it live too. But he also has a podcast where he'll take a song and deconstruct it and then put it back together instrument by instrument. So you hear the drums. They start with the rhythm section, you start with the drums and then the bass, and then they put them together. And then they'll listen to the guitar and then put it with the drums and the bass. And then it's amazing the level of the talent and musicianship that you hear. You hear songs in ways you never heard them before because so many instruments are buried in the mix, but it's all part of the feel of the song. So it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
That's very
and
cool.
then the book, I think you had a couple books you had recommended before. What were the books that come to mind?
Let's see. There was one, it's called Brag, The Art of Tooting Your Own Horn Without Blowing It.
Okay.
And I want to say that was by Peggy Klaus.
Okay.
And that's a very good, especially if you're actually starting out, as you're graduating. That's a good one because it sort of it helps you develop your sort of elevator pitch, which I know is sort of like a cliche term, but it helps you focus on like a short version of how are you going to sell yourself to somebody else. Again, without coming across as if you're bragging. So that one is very good. There's a lot of things because they have exercises and questions, and you've got to take into consideration your answers. And I've actually used that in interviews.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So it's called Brag. I'll give you the info if you want to post it.
Yeah.
But I think it's called Brag, The Art of Tooting Your Own Horn Without Blowing It.
Okay. And I know you're a big fan of the Donald Passman book too, Everything You Need to Know About the Music Industry as well. That one, correct?
Yes. That one is one that I think everybody should read every few years. I actually just took a music business course over at UCLA Extension last year. And that was the textbook that they used. It was just sort of like a music business refresher course, going through all kinds of contracts and stuff like that. And so that book is like the Bible for the music industry, I think.
Yeah, we'll leave all the links to the books in like the notes for the episode as well. But you've dropped some gems on us. Thank you. This is dope. All right, so we had another question from the audience, Kathy Brown, who's also a graduate. We love our graduates tuning in. So what's up, Kathy? Kathy says, "Hi, Tiffany. How has the pandemic affected your work life, working from home?" So I guess to continue with this question, like you're working some days 16 hours. How are you able to maybe stay balanced, if possible, during this kind of time? Talk to us about that.
You know what? There's well, first of all, congratulations to all the graduates. It's such a great feeling to be done. The work-life balance, that's sort of, it's really more it's more on me, like I could balance it out more, but I sort of choose, like, for me, I would rather just, like, put it this way. So A&R operations, we have all the music. So when a song is in the recording process and we have the different rough mixes, or we've got the master and it's not yet released. So once we have the master, then we can distribute it to all the other departments within Epic. So because everybody needs it in order to do their job: marketing, international marketing, digital marketing, for all the social media assets, publicity, sales and commerce, radio promo. Sales and commerce is pitching it out to all of our, partners. Radio promo is pitching it out to the stations. We have video promo, who needs the music in order to solicit directors, to try to find directors for the video. So everybody needs the music, and A&R operations has it. And so, for me, it's just easier. Like, let me just get everybody so they can do their job. Because if it's filtering through us, like, I don't want to be holding people up. So, that's why I sort of choose work over life balance. It's just, but then again, on the weekends, I'm watching DJs online and listening to what they're playing, kind of doing research and, working on my DJ crates.
Right.
So it's just, it's always music.
Yeah, definitely. So our director, Dr. Ellen Kim, she has a question for you, and it'll kind of be a good segue, because then we can talk about something that we have in common. Any advice for students looking for networking opportunities with music professionals? Any organizations or events students should consider participating in?
For networking, I would say there's a couple different answers here. So one, when you're first starting out in your job, even if you are, a receptionist, that's where you're starting to make your connections. Okay. So, that's how you start building your contacts, because you're, you might just be taking messages and stuff, but that's how you get to know people. And so it's like establish a very personal, I like to establish a personable relationship over the phone. Right. So that's one way to start networking, is just sort of like take a moment to ask. If this person calls in all the time, take a moment to ask, how are they doing? And, get that relationship going. Second is, take advantage of things that are happening around town. The Recording Academy has events, and like Amro and I go to ASCAP every year, to the ASCAP Expo, or, with another DJ friend of ours. Yes. And, or there's NAMM, and, anything that has like a group, if there's just any industry events, if it's something that you find interesting, like, I think, this is not really my world, but like if you're the Music Supervisors Guild, they have, they've got events. So so just, if you kind of keep an eye out on what's happening in town, and then that could be one way of, of networking. There's also LinkedIn, but I'm not sure how, in my experience, how much of network, I mean, it's important to have LinkedIn, but I'm not sure how much of a networking opportunity it is. Although it's certainly critical to have a LinkedIn profile. Yes. But also, there's, God, I just lost my train of thought. You've got.
We talked about the music supervisors, ASCAP.
Yeah. Oh, NAMM. I know what it was. So usually what I do in order to start somebody did this for me early on in my career. They suggested reaching out for guidance and direction. And so that's the approach and the verbiage that I use. Because so many people, especially in entertainment, they've got their hand out. Like, can you help me? What can you do for me? Is there something that, like, I mean, everybody needs something, but it's also your approach, right? So I think people are especially in A&R, on the creative side, People, I say A&R operations and nobody hears operations. They hear A&R. And so it's like, no, I don't sign anybody. I cannot help you with your band. But, but if I think the approach of asking someone who has been in music for a while, like, do you have maybe 15 minutes or maybe half an hour, where I could speak to you and, just to get some guidance and direction, because then it's a much softer approach and you're not asking for anything. You're just wanting to learn about this person. And chances are somebody has done that for them. So it's, in my experience, people are much more open to having a conversation if you're just asking them for guidance.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a great way to network.
Agreed. You mentioned the ASCAP. I talk about ASCAP a lot in class, in the music industry club, behind the scenes. We had a scholarship for some students to attend this year. Unfortunately, it was canceled. How has ASCAP impacted you? What are your kind of favorite facts and things that you get to experience at ASCAP?
You know what? It's ASCAP to me, the expo is, there's so much information. There's all these songwriter panels and stuff on publishing and stuff on, last year I attended a panel on music supervising for film and TV. There's, I think panels that you were attending on, recording. And then you just sort of have people talking about, you've got, I think, producer writers who are talking about their experience. So, it's just a lot happening there. Like it's a lot of information, and it's a great networking opportunity because, we get to see our friends every year.
Yeah. We missed it this year. So bummer.
I know.
I got one question from Myra, and then I'm going to toss it back over to Griselle. So Myra, hello, Myra. Thanks for working. Myra's working behind the scenes for us here. She says, hello, Tiffany. Thanks for being here with us. What do you recommend for students to do during their college years that are trying to stand out in the entertainment world, but find it hard to stand out?
How to stand out in your college years? The only, I'm going to say internships, but that's all changed with the pandemic, right? Like, I don't know how internships are going to play out because that is a great networking opportunity. I mean, internships, that's how I got started. That's how pretty much everybody gets started. The way to stand out, in college, there's street teams. I mean, like Sony has Sony Music University. The record labels have their college teams. That's one way to sort of, maybe get involved and be noticed. And then I think once you get to, you do get that internship or you do end up on a street team somewhere. I think your work ethic is going to be what is going to make you stand out. I mean, because honestly, like I could instantly think of different people over the course of my career who had an outstanding work ethic. And that is what is going to get them noticed above somebody else who's just kind of, doing their job, what they need to get by.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all for the overachiever route. It's not necessarily like the healthiest thing. Right. But your work ethic is what's going to make you stand out. But I mean, as far as while you're still in college, see how you can get involved with, like the label street teams and stuff.
Yeah, great advice. I have no doubt that the work ethic at Cal State Fullerton will rival any other colleges. So, of course, I'm biased, but that's true. What skills can students be learning or creating now to maybe set themselves apart? And then what are some important skills that you look for in people that maybe you might hire as an intern or hire to be part of your team?
I'm not involved in the hiring process, but over the years I have been involved in the training process. And so, one thing is, like take notes. I've trained assistants who don't take, I've had to ask them to take notes. Like, there's no way you're going to remember all of this. Like, and when you take, like, I'm a heavy note taker, like a heavy note taker, but what that does is it allows me to reference something, hopefully, especially in the learning process. Right. And so like what I always do, even now for jobs that I'm, interviewing for or that I've been hired for, I'm asking, my new boss, what is the learning curve on this position? Because one, that gives me an expectation of the learning curve and how long it's going to sort of take me to really get it. And two, if they haven't thought of it, it now gets them to think of it like, okay, it sets expectations clearly for all parties, right? So always ask questions, always take notes. And then that'll maybe sort of help mitigate from making mistakes and, it's building your foundation.
Agree.
Yeah.
Grizel, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so on the DJing side, what do you think is most helpful about having either like a passion project or a side hustle or a side project along with your current
what's
work?
helpful about it? Well, everybody has a side hustle.
Yeah.
Everybody has a side hustle.
Yeah.
I honestly did not see DJing in my life at all. Like I did not see this. Like there's some things in life you just don't see coming, and DJing was one of them. and yet here I am.
Here you are.
It was a series of event circumstances, and then I thought, I'm going to look into this, and then I loved the creative part of it. But I don't think that really answers your question, though. Like what do I like about it? Again, it's music in a whole different way. It's listening. Like every few years, there's something that comes along that I listen to music in an entirely different way. So like these are songs that I knew, and now I'm listening to them. Not only am I discovering a whole bunch of new songs and genres that I normally wouldn't have thought to listen to otherwise, but now I'm there's a music programming element to DJing because you have to put your sets together. I mean, it's still on the fly, right? Based on what's happening with your audience and with the dancers and how they're responding to your music. But at least I sort of have a direction. So when I say set, it's not a playlist. It's just like a general direction of, okay, this is the genres they're responding to. This is, so that's what I mean by music programming. But there's such a satisfaction. Like, I mean, DJing initially, every gig will scare the hell out of me. I get performance anxiety. It is stressful. But I love it. And, as the night is going and everybody's having a great time, especially if it's, weddings, there's such a feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment at the end of the night when it's over and like everything went smoothly. There were no technical difficulties, and, your client is happy, and, everybody just had a wonderful time. And I think when quarantine is over, and everybody's, clubs are open back up again and gatherings, I think people are going to go hard.
Yes. Let's hope. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I wanted to also ask, so in terms of DJing, you can DJ on vinyl, correct?
Yes.
Yes. CDJs, correct?
Yes.
And
although I
controller.
haven't touched CDJs in a while.
Right. But the point is that, Ruby Blue can DJ in any kind of method you need her to do that. Because, we're not just come up here learning with some sync button or whatever. This is the real deal.
No, you can't use sync.
There you go.
No.
And I you see, you've got it. So tell us about your experience at Scratch Academy and how that helped you grow personally and professionally. Because I talk about Scratch in my experience, but it'd be great for them to hear other people's experience as well.
I loved Scratch Academy. I did. I went in there, and I went in there for an open house, and it was 1 hour, and I was terrified to walk in, and I thought, what am I doing? Like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever done. And halfway through, it was just me and another girl. And halfway through, I realized, like, this is really creative how they're mixing the songs together. And it was Hoppa. It was Hoppa and Fortify. Yeah. And, they were taking like an acapella, I think it was like a Beatles acapella, and they put it under like over some other like more current track. And
Yes.
it was amazing. And so I thought, I could do this. And so I made through my time at Scratch the most amazing friends because they had such a wonderful community, and we have the same social circle, everybody
Yes.
I'm talking about.
Yes.
And but you hear about DJs and being competitive and that does exist, but has not been my experience.
Right.
It's a wonderful DJ community that we're all a part of. And that I think is the best thing that came. Like I have, lifelong friends that I never would have crossed paths with otherwise.
Exactly.
Other than our love for DJing, because we were kind of in the trenches together when we're figuring this out, and then starting our businesses together.
Exactly. Speaking of the trenches, I found that at Scratch, I learned, and we had to be resilient. Because you pass the test, you don't pass the test, you pass the class, like you have to be able to bounce back quickly, whether it's in a set or not in a set. So I want to get your thoughts on resilience. And one of the things that I really admire about our current graduating class is that they had to be quite resilient to switch from traditional learning to virtual learning in the middle of a semester. They're trying to graduate in 2 months, and some people aren't learners, but for the most part, almost all of them continued and stuck with it, which I really admire. It's really inspiring. So how has resilience, or how have you had to be resilient in your career? And explain that to us.
Resilient as a DJ, or resilient, I guess, just in general?
In general, or as a DJ, but in general, we can start with that.
God, being resilient. When you have tech problems, you've got to be resilient. I mean, I've had some tech problems. I had a tech problem once that was, I couldn't figure it out. And it was before a wedding, and it got down to 10 minutes before the ceremony began, and I figured it out. Mm-hmm. But up until that point, you can't let, I was having a heart attack inside, but outwardly you have to remain calm. And that, that goes in my regular job, or DJing. If there's a problem, you cannot freak out. You've got to stay calm. I mean, you might be, having a panic attack internally, and that's fine internally. As long as you're able to you've got to stay focused, and you have to be able to keep your calm. And like we had talked about earlier, you've got to be able to figure it out, and figuring it out comes, especially under pressure and anxiety, comes with a solid foundation. You've got to know your equipment. You've got to know how to troubleshoot if there's problems. You've got to know your music. You've got to know, your Serato and your software. Yeah. So it really comes, resilience comes with having a solid foundation. And especially from college, you hear all the time, I don't know if people say it now as much, but it used to be people would say, oh, you don't need a music industry education, just go into the music industry. But then you have the whole movie industry, and they have film majors, right? So why wouldn't the music industry have music industry majors, right? For me, that's build your foundation. And then from that, you've got the tools to go out, and then you can be resilient, and you can adjust and adapt, especially on the fly and under pressure, if you've got that foundation.
Absolutely. So we have some more questions from the audience here. So Jade, who is a recent graduate as well, last year, I want to say, hi, Jade. She says, hi, Tiffany. With reference to your career journey, how did you know when to switch paths or take a new direction or opportunity? Also, if you were able to find mentors, how were you able to develop that relationship? Good question, Jade.
The opportunities kind of came. Sometimes I was approached with an opportunity. Again, it's, kind of through people you already have relationships established with. And then the others is just searching. Mm-hmm. And so I have had a couple career switches. It's all been music related, but, I worked at a studio referral service. I went from working in a studio to a studio referral service where we would find recording studios for people's projects nationwide. I've worked at, from there, an opportunity presented itself to go work at a producer management firm that managed, it was GPS, Global Positioning Services. They managed producers, engineers, mixers, and songwriters. Yeah. And so everything I had been doing, initially when I first graduated college, I thought I was going to go into artist management. But everything I did was working either in or with studios, with artist managers or producer, really more working with producers, engineers, mixers, and their managers. So somebody had told me, you know what, instead of just focusing on artist management, why don't you learn to do both? Because producers and mixers tend to have a steadier income stream versus, putting all your eggs in one basket and hoping, the artist management pans out. You learn to do both. And so just by nature, everything I did was working with producers. And so my career kind of like took that path. And then in terms of mentoring, I've asked people to be my mentor if they were open to it. And then when I worked at Disney in their music group, I worked at Disney Music Publishing before Epic, they actually have a mentorship program. And so they would take senior executives and pair them with, some of the lower roles, lower employees, but the assistants and managers and such, and they would make sure it was different departments and different buildings, still within music,
right?
But they had that way you're not with somebody you kind of already know, and sometimes, places have mentorship programs, and if they don't, it might not be a bad idea to suggest one.
Right. Yeah.
If the executives are open to it.
True. Excellent advice. Mm-hmm. Another question from our audience, Isla, who's a graduate. Isla says, "Hi, Tiffany. Is there anything you haven't done that you would like to try, like a new hobby or another side hustle?"
I'm tired. But you know what fascinates me is music related is music therapy. And so I've kind of was, just like doing a little bit of research on music therapy and like kind of what's in that world. And, as far as a hobby, like I want a dog. I've been in quarantine. I want to get a dog.
We can find you a dog now. That's not so hard. We're going to work on that for you. We'll get you
I'm looking for a Bernese Mountain Dog. Those are my dogs. They're about 100 pounds.
Duly noted. We'll be on the hunt for you.
I need a dog.
Grizel, as we come to a close, Grizel, I'll let you kind of ask your final question or two, and we have a couple others, and then we'll let Ruby Blue be about her day. So go ahead, Grizel.
Well, so as we kind of mentioned before we started the broadcast, you came to campus during the fall semester and got to speak to some of the students there, and I was in attendance. I wanted to thank you, first of all. One of the books that you recommended to me, I ended up purchasing and buying by Brene Brown, which honestly helped me so much. Yeah, I started listening to her podcast and everything. So I just wanted to see if you could share. Oh my gosh, she's totally changed it for me. But yeah, I just wanted to know if you could share whether it be any other books or any other resources that you think, help build confidence, especially as a lot of us are, first starting to go into the job market.
I think Gift of Imperfections, was that the Brene Brown
book?
That was outstanding.
So good.
I highly recommend that. That's just in general, it's not that big of a book. It's a very, very good read. There's one called it's a book for women on how to negotiate. It's called, actually I have it right here. It's called Ask for It: How Women Can Use the Power of Negotiation to Get What They Really Want, by Linda Babcock and Sarah Lashover. There's and I can't think of any specifically offhand right now, but there are books on how to negotiate, so that's always a really good skill to learn, especially if you're starting out in your career. And I think negotiating tends to be harder for women than it is for men. I know I was not taught how to negotiate. I had to, get books and figure it out for myself. And there's times that I, could have done it much better than I had, especially when and you want to learn that, especially when it comes to, to negotiating your salary and stuff like that. So, any books on negotiating, it's not a book, but you know what? I haven't checked it, but Amro, you could tell me. So I used to work I moved back east to the Virginia, DC area for a few years, and I worked in recruiting back there. So I wasn't in music for a few years. And what I learned in recruiting is a lot of these universities and Ivy League schools want their graduates to end up at a Fortune 500 company. So they will have resources on their career services website. Is it career services at Fullerton?
I believe it's something,
job placement, or, and you can go to any school. And although I highly recommend starting with Cal State Fullerton first, but go to you don't have to log in. You can just access this job information and on resumes, because resumes tend to be trendy in their format and their wording. So they're going to put all these resources out. You could go to any of the top schools in the country and find out how are they teaching their students to put together their resume and how to conduct job interviews. Because like I said, when these students, they graduate and they land at these, top Fortune 500 companies, that reflects back on the school and their graduation and job placement rate. Right. So I always, even now I tell, friends who have graduated college a long time ago, go to the school's university websites, and that's how you learn, figure out what's happening with resumes and how to interview. It's an excellent resource.
All right. We'll leave some links to all that. We have lots of links to share. So great. And the books, I'm just so happy that you're sharing all the books and everything. That warms my heart. So awesome. So we have two final questions from the audience. We'll let you go after these two. The first one from Kathy Brown again. And I'm noticing a theme from Kathy here. So Kathy says, let's look here. In an industry where people are always on the go, what do you do to take a pause? And what do you do when you find yourself overwhelmed?
So in quarantine, I've apparently become bougie, and I am now drinking, fruit infused water all day, and inhaling lavender diffuser.
If it works and it's legal, I mean,
Well, yeah, those room diffusers, and just add a little lavender essential oil to sort of calm down.
Okay, that's a great tip.
I'm hoping that works.
All right.
But otherwise, I mean, really, it sounds cliche, but meditation. I mean, sometimes, even if it's just for a few minutes before a big meeting, just take some time to inhale, exhale, kind of get grounded, kind of shake off a little bit of that stress and anxiety. Hobby. I have no hobby right now.
We're gonna get you a dog. That's gonna be your hobby right there.
I need the dog.
Gonna be the hobby. Yes, we're gonna make that happen. You were talking about negotiating books. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That's on my list. That's a good one. I think we'll have that for one of our summer book club readings, Cal State Fullerton EHM Summer Book Club. That's gonna be a good one. So that's a good one. And then our final question, and then we'll say our goodbyes, is from Jade. And she asked one of my favorite questions, which is if you're looking at someone who's aspiring to be an A&R, what advice would you give your younger self? So what advice would you give Ruby Blue based on what you know now, if you were to go back and talk to yourself right as you were graduating from Cal State Northridge?
Well, I would say prior to graduating, I would have paid attention in some of my classes a little bit more because the classes, honestly, the classes that I thought I will never use this, I ended up using, for example, I thought I'm my recording class, it was interesting. I wish I would have paid a little closer attention because I was I'm not going to be a producer. I'm not going in the recording. I'm not going to be recording anything in a studio. I'm not a performer. And then my first job out of college, I'm working in a recording studio, right? So, and like, publishing, it's like, I'm never going to work in publishing. I ended up working 6 years in publishing. Never say never. You just never know. You've got to be fluid and move with the industry. In terms of A&R, you've got to know like obviously what's current, what's happening. In terms of seeking, I saw this, and actually I had overheard it, and it was an interview for a job in marketing. It wasn't at a record label. It wasn't a job in A&R. And I heard the interviewer ask the person, "What's on your Spotify playlist?" And they're like, who's your top 5 on your, and they had them pull up Spotify and show. So you never know when like something in an interview is going to head in that direction. And, I thought, God, that's from marketing. That's not even A&R.
Right.
And they had their top five favorite artists, and, like who are they following, listening to on SoundCloud, and who's, what's happening on TikTok. Like if you're going into A&R, know all that. Yeah. And also nowadays, like, a lot of times in A&R meetings, they're talking about like what's happening like with the influencers and stuff like that on social media. So you kind of want an overall perspective, not just on the music, but what's happening, music wise on social media. Like what are the influencers doing? What's happening on Twitch or TikTok or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, we've come to a little bit over hours, so we're really appreciative of your time. Thank you very much. If people want to reach you or contact you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
LinkedIn.
All right.
LinkedIn. I will respond on LinkedIn.
Good.
Yeah. A lot of your students reached out after the last time.
I'm proud professor, hashtag. Yeah. So yes, definitely. Elizabeth left a comment. Elizabeth, we will edit the show notes in YouTube and Facebook so all the books we mentioned, because we mentioned a lot of books. And I do want to say, Tiffany, that you're a wealth of knowledge. I mean, just thank you for sharing so much wisdom and books and just some of the little things you shared were lots of nuggets there. So I'm going to have to rewatch this again. I just want to say thank you very much. Grizel, awesome questions. Thank you as well. Great job. And we just appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon. We're going to end off the show now, and we will see you all next week. But thanks to Tiffany and Grizel. Everyone stay safe, and we'll see you next week at the same time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, it was our pleasure.
Next week, we will host Natalie Fulton. Natalie's a special events sales manager at Warner Brothers Studios. After graduating from Cornell University with a Bachelor's of Science degree focused in hotel administration, Natalie has worked for companies such as Hyatt Hotels, House of Blues, Allied PRA, and Warner Brothers Studios. We look forward to our conversation with Natalie next week at 3 p.m. Pacific Time.